Hey guys, I'm Chris,
And Mike,
and welcome back to this week's No Limits, the Scot Harvath podcast. What's new this week, Mike?
hey, I'm excited to finally record our first half breakdown of the Scot Harvath series by Brad Thor. Now, Chris, a little backstory, a peek behind the curtain for the listeners. You and I sat down last week, first week of the new year, ready to kick this thing off. We hit record, and I was like, wait a minute. I don't even know what happened in half these books. Can we go over them for a quick second? And in the recording, I said, can we do a 10-second recap of each book? I'm
Oh
thinking
yeah,
2 minutes max, 10 seconds each book. Bang this out, quick review. Then we get going. Chris, would you like to tell the people what happened that evening?
proceeded to essentially recap notes for 2 hours, pretty much, the whole time recording. Where you're just you're writing down lines, Swits, skiing, Park City, just like these little notes. And then we did go over everything, and then we would go off on tangents and be like, oh, remember this, remember that, remember that.
Yeah.
It was actually very fruitful, and I think this takes me. We've gotten so I don't want to say lax, but we've gotten so good with the podcast being a little less rigid, structured in terms of
Right.
we used to type out a lot.
Remember those notes? The Mid-Trap Pod
I used
notes?
to top out like a lot of
The research
notes.
went deep.
Yeah, and was it necessary? No, but I guess it taught us how to become better podcasters, and now we're in a groove where we can read a novel. Whether it's the first half, second half, we kind of like know what exactly we're going to talk about.
Yep. We have a formula, I think.
Yeah,
Like our segments. We kind of have segments now with the scorecard, judge a book by the cover, limerick time. I feel like we have a little bit of a flow.
yeah, yeah. So it's as we've gotten more into a groove per se, we haven't had a pod like this where we've had to obviously like our interviews we jot down like questions we want to answer, like do
Sure.
do some research there, but for any given book, besides like writing down some key scenes we want to talk and make sure we hit, or anything from the book that we I definitely want to bring up. I normally write down like a couple questions I want to ask you. We haven't had a pod like this where it required a lot, or so we kind of just sat down like, oh yeah, we can do this. We just read all these books.
And I was like, what happens in
uh
State of the Union or First Commandment? And how is that different than what happens in Foreign Influence?
and we were like, yeah, this will be a bad pod if we just go. So let's just take the time. We sat down, we talked about it, we wrote out some notes, and so I think we got a pretty nice pod here for you.
Yeah. And we do have the recording of that banter, and it made for some pretty entertaining content for our patrons. We made that a patron only episode. So I think they'll enjoy it.
Mark listened to the entire thing,
I
right?
bet he did. I bet he did. I was like, guys, listen to this on 2 speed. Half of it is just junk. But halfway through, it got hysterical. I've already called Gretchen Casey Gretchen Wilson in the past. Well, this time we called Holland, his old Secret Service buddy, Tom Holland.
Oh
We
yeah,
didn't even
Spider-Man.
realize for a
Spider-Man.
little while.
Well, someone picked up that we one of the pods we called it the Last Apostle.
That's right. That was funny. The Last Apostle.
Apparently, both Daryl and Mark were cracking up hearing us talk about the Last Apostle.
They
So
both picked up on it, and we had no idea we even said it.
we were taught, and what's funny is that we both really liked the Apostle. So like we
Yeah.
should have known that's the Last Patriot we were talking about, the book that we didn't quite love, and obviously we're gonna get to our rankings later on, but.
Yeah. I wonder how many times we said things like that. Well, we always mess up Scott and Brad. That is ubiquitous. That is
Oh
gone.
yeah, people should just know. I mean, they're both 4-letter names, and they're
We've done that a million times.
Brad should be so honored.
Here's another one. It goes back to Mid-Trap Pod, but one of my buddies I grew up with, high school buddy, close friend, he started getting into the Vince Flynn books here and there a little bit, but he just read American Assassin. And he's like, should I watch the movie? I was like, no, not at all. They fucked it up, blah, blah, blah. We went down that rabbit hole. And then he goes, oh, there was one episode of your podcast where Mitch Rapp told somebody to just call him Max Powers. And apparently you and I on that podcast were like, Max Powers, that sounds familiar. I know Mitch is using that from something, but we didn't know the reference. Well, what is this? 3 years later, my buddy texts me that he listened to that episode. Max Powers was what Homer Simpson changed his name to in that one episode.
No way.
Yes. And he's like, maybe it sounds familiar because of that Simpsons episode. So that is
Oh,
a
that's
deep
funny.
cut Vince Flynn humor that Mitch Rapp dropped a Simpsons joke in one of the books.
Wow. Wow.
So shout out to Dawson with that one. Pow
Yeah, no,
Dawson.
the Patriots, they keep us on our toes, you know.
They really do. They really do. Deep cut right there. Deep cut. Homer to the max was the episode in The Simpsons.
So should we get into it?
Yeah.
Scott's first 11 books, right?
Yeah. And after all that planning, all that banter, I still am confusing these books. So Chris, you gotta help me out here a little bit. You helped me the other night. I'm gonna need that help again. But I tried my best, and this delay here gave me some time to think about a limerick. 11 books written by Thor. Oh, let's keep going for sure. From lions to list, with many a tryst, adventures with Scott, please more.
Boom,
Lions to
baby.
list, blacklist, that's halfway through.
Ah, there you go. Oh, I like that. I like
With
that's
many a
impressive.
tryst, we're going to
With
talk
many a
about Scott and his
tryst.
ladies. Yeah.
Yes, yes, yeah. So, kind of building this off of how we did two of thee for the Mitrap Pod again, halfway and at the end. We had superlatives. So, just to give you an example of what we did for Vince Flynn, we had best villain, best action scene, best kill, best plot, best title, best cover, that kind of stuff. For Brad, obviously there's some of those I definitely want to talk to you about. Like best kill, like there's not like is it bad of me to say like there's not like a lot of distinctive kills that I can remember?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It's strange that it's hard to come up with that one after he's killed so many times.
But Scott kills a lot of people.
He
It's like
does, but it's not glorified or it's not written on the page like that was a badass kill, 1-2 punch got him. It's like I killed because I had to, and let's keep
sure.
moving because there's still a
Yeah.
bomb to defuse or there's still a population to save.
Yeah,
You almost move through the kills as the means to the end. It like he has to do the job. He's just getting his hands dirty. So yeah, there is something that's funny about trying to do that one. I bet people are screaming out of their mind.
I know.
Like, how is
So
it not that one in
the only
foreign
thing
influence?
the only thing that I could really think of was there's a couple different like torture tactics that would fill that. And then there's so
Sure.
the one with the beetle or the scarab that he puts in the guy's ear at the very end when like the first book where we meet the troll, that one. And then also the pepper spray like there's multiple times where pepper spray comes into play with a penis. And so
Said like a true doctor of the podcast.
so for best kill, I'm going to give it to that. But to kick it off, I think we just got to go. We got to go chalk, and we got to talk about the best villain.
Yes. I do have a kill though that comes to mind,
Okay,
and maybe a bit of an obscure one.
sure.
I'm not exactly sure why this sticks out, but there's that one where he uses the boat. It's at Meg's wedding, Meg Cassidy's wedding, and something was the action was building so heavily, and he rams the boat like he takes this speed cigarette boat and rams this
that's a
other
good
one.
one.
It's about to go into the yacht where the whole wedding party is celebrating, and he intercepts it. But one of the coolest things is like that wasn't the kill. He then has to swim under the dock to find the guy who's like barely hanging on, and he uses his seal like be one with the water mentality to sneak up on this guy who's already dying out essentially, but he finishes him from in the water.
Yeah,
We
that's
get this
first commandment
reflection.
you're talking about. Yeah.
First Commandment, yeah, dude. First Commandment was jam packed.
I know that was one of the things we like kind of were, and one of the segments I want to do is like best traveling heavy. And we're not going to go over
Sure.
every single book, but I think
No.
we should highlight some of our favorite. Maybe most of these are just highlighting like some of our favorite traveling heavy books by talking about like all the places we go and different ones. But yeah, like when we were discussing First Commandment, it was amazing. All the places we go, everything that happens, and then in the end, we get like, this shock reveal that Ari Shone is the big bad villain of that one.
Right.
So, yeah.
So that book, just to stay on it a quick second, for me, that's a kill that stands out. Is it Scott's best? I don't know, but the way it's written and the sequence goes down, and the fact that it's bringing in Meg, who is a character from a number of books back. I think
Mhm.
Claudia Mueller is brought back in, and she gives some tip or information that helps them. And then we're also getting in that book the Ari Shone storyline, which started, I think, with Path of the Assassin, or was
Yep.
somehow related to Adar and Abu Nadal. And there were these dangling threads that didn't sit right with us after Path. We thought it was a bit strange. Yet when we read that book, what, 4 books later?
Hmm.
2, 3, 4. 4 books later, so many pieces fit into place. That book was like a puzzle. Talking
Yeah.
amalgam, it was an amalgam of everything so far in his first 6 books. Yet I would never pin First Commandment as one of the top Brad Thor books off the top of my head. Like, it took
Right.
that intellectual, us going back and forth, chewing on that book to be like, wow, Tracy was in the hospital. So we thought that was a sure thing, their relationship. And now, after Takedown, right, and the cliffhanger of her getting sniped, that changes. We meet Tim Finney, the Sargasso boys at
Right.
Valhalla, souping up his car. It's the first time Scott and Nicholas interact in the chat room, right?
Right. Right.
And then they meet up in Brazil at his island, and basically they have to save each other. They don't even know if they could trust one another, but they have to save one another. I think there's a cooking scene, of course, which becomes signature of the troll. DCI Vale in Congressional Country Club in the sauna. I remember that was cool, how Scott snuck in there. We got the guy, Juba, released from Gitmo. Now he's
Right.
involved.
There's the whole Gitmo like
Dude.
stuff, and then
And not to mention Rick Morrell, the Omega team, Kate Palmer, Caroline Leonard. Those were all his old Secret Service buddies. They come back into it. His mom is attacked. Remember the 10 plagues that Ari
right.
Shone released?
Yep.
All of that is happening in one book, plus that kill at the end, that boat scene in, I think was it Lake Geneva? I think they were on.
Yeah, they're at the
That is
president's
just
because that's the president's like house, right?
right. He has a house there. I just thought, oh my goodness, this is unreal. What's going on
Yeah.
in First Commandment?
Yeah. Now that you're saying that, the ending often has like some pretty cool kills. So like what
True.
sticks out to me, like the apostle, like coming down that mountain,
Oh yeah.
or tracking the terrorist and the Russian. That was a pretty cool kill.
Speaking of the apostle, he at one point in that convoy, that race to the end scene, he like sneaks out or sneaks up on this like Jeep and like tosses 2 grenades like right there, and then backs up. And so like you can't pick one kill, but if you talk that whole action sequence in the apostle, and they're calling in for the air support as well, like those are a lot of kills, but that would be up there for some of his best.
Right. And then I think back to like both Full Black and Blacklist. And it's funny that like these books are back to back, and we've covered them like months apart because we had a long break with
true.
covering other things. But now that I look at them and that they're close together, it's kind of funny how you have both this James Standing character who's the main villain in that one,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have the Craig Middleton character in Blacklist. Both of these like asshole, I guess Middleton's not necessarily rich, but
Power
it's like
influential.
power influential guys who in the end Scott has to come in and, in the one Middleton gets killed, and then in the other one he forces Standing to kill himself, right? So
Yeah, and that happens a lot where that last chapter is Scott closing up loose ends, tying up
right.
loose ends and putting the bookend on it. So yeah, one doesn't stand out above another, but it happens so often that we just kind of come to love it. That happened in Rising Tiger, I think, as well. He just kind of hunted down all the bad guys at the end and just boom, 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 picked them all off. So yeah, that happens. But since you mentioned Full Black going to Blacklist, I think that's something else we've seen through this first half of Thor. When he connects books with that cliffhanger and chooses to open the next one right where that left off,
right,
it usually means we're in for a 1-2 punch. Full Black to Blacklist, Takedown to the First Commandment.
Well, even like Foreign Influence to Full Black with like, because in Foreign Influence, that's where we meet the Athena team, and we meet the guy who calls him Peaches, Ashford, who
Right,
he's the ally in that book, and then at the
right,
very end,
right.
we find out that he actually shoots Aziz Alim with the RPG,
Yeah,
and then in Full Black, he's working with Standing to you know be the terrorist, right?
yeah, yeah. And so when a villain also lasts the course of two books, we said the same with Vince Flynn, right?
Yeah,
When you
it's
had a
nice.
villain that lasted two or more books, it was something special. And in this case, it wasn't always a villain, right? An ally turned villain, an old friend who
Right.
turned on you. You put a little bit of that twist in there, and you've got the special sauce, the secret sauce.
Yeah, and I think we haven't covered these books yet, but I think that's maybe eventually
Spy Master.
it's like when that 3 book arc from
Yeah.
Spy Master to
Backlash.
Backlash
That might be the best one.
to Near Dark, like those 3 books, like because that's all one story, like wrapping everything up. It's just
Yeah.
it's really good.
That might be the best one. Spy Master to Blacklist to Backlash when we get there.
Hmm. Yeah, and then you mentioned it already, but like Tracy getting shot at the end of Takedown,
Right.
bleeding right into First Commandment, right?
Which allows us to bring the troll in because he was like a side character who appeared once, but now it's like Scott thinks it's him because he left the gift at the
Right.
door
He
at the
left the
same
dog.
time as the
Yeah,
shot.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think right there we talked about a bunch of them. What books in that little discussion before we really get going did we kind of not mention or were not involved there? Because I think to me that indicates they probably had some side adventure that either fell flat or didn't stick out. I mean, we don't even need to mention Blowback. Let's ignore that right now. Like State of the Union, actually something does stick out from State of the Union. Helmut Drager.
Herman Drager. Yeah, he's so if we want to get into villains, he's definitely on the top list of one of my villains.
Yeah.
I picked him out. I guess what's interesting, we're talking about all these connective tissue, but when you look at like the first 3 novels, like Lions is its own thing. We obviously haven't talked about Lions, and maybe we should have a discussion about that. But it's just setting up who Scott is, and I think it's like it's a I don't want to say perfect novel, but it's near perfect novel in terms
Yeah.
of introducing a character, engaging plot, amazing buy-in. You know, the descriptions in that novel, the setting in that novel is
Yeah.
just hands down amazing. And then I think, as we get forward, he then brings back, that's when we bring back a Claudia Mueller. Like he quickly goes away from her in the second book, but then like comes back to her later on.
Yeah.
And then Path of Assassin, his second book, and I've said this before, second books like tend to
They're
not be
tough.
good. Tend to
Yeah.
not be like we have yet to see. Oh no, that's not true because we really liked the second book from Jack Carr.
That is true. That's a great point.
Yeah.
It took some flack though from some people,
It
but
it did. It
on this
did. So
podcast we love
on
it.
this podcast, it's not. But what I'm saying is like a lot of times second books
Yeah.
have people have problems with. And I would say Path of the Assassin is one of those. But he ends up closing that the way I liked he closed that story with First Commandment, like almost elevates Path of Assassin a little bit
Right.
because
Right.
it it did all that work to set up the mom, and then he has a son, and
Yeah.
it's already shown.
Yeah. Yes, I agree with that completely. It's kind of a bummer it took that long to rectify a book that we wanted to be a banger, following up Lions. But I will say Path of the Assassin, when you and I were talking, kind of the Meg Cassidy stuff, like her introduction being this like corporate exec who her father taught her to shoot. So now all of a sudden she can save this plane from the terrorist attack. While it was cool, the buy-in wasn't there. And I'll be honest, I don't know if I ever bought into her as one of Scott's love interests
No,
either.
no.
So she almost fell flat in that way. But the one thing that saves the book and stands out is that helicopter scene. I don't remember
Yeah.
why. For the life of me, I have no reason why they're there or which desert it is. I think North Africa. But the dune buggies, they're all riding these dune buggies, and the chopper has to come in to exfil them. It stands out to me. But the problem is, it was one, so long ago, and two, I have no idea why or how it related to anything. Oh, he went. Adara Nadal was in that camp, and
Yeah,
somebody
that's
talked
why.
to her.
And then she was Meg Cassidy was the only one who could
ID her
ID her, so she had to go with them.
with the
Yeah, like
silver
with the
eyes.
silver eyes. Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
Meg
Because
had
she
to
had
come.
Meg had come. Yeah, yeah.
Oh,
It's all
and Rick
coming back
Morell
to you.
had to train her to get ready.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. So like there's
Yeah. Okay.
parts of that book that are good. And I thought like even like learning about a little bit of the training at the farm when they're there, like it's like I don't believe that she would just be allowed to join and be trained at the farm like this. But it's kind of cool to get a peek behind the curtain and see like what happens there. I think that that's something
Yeah.
maybe that Brad was interested in. Yeah, that book was just I don't know, definitely on the lower end.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
and then to follow that up with State of the Union again, going like a completely different direction, right?
Right. It's a different book.
And different
Herman the
book,
German,
right?
Berlin.
We spent a lot of time in Europe. We have this nuke. I love the scenes where like because you don't really know in the beginning if I'm like on his name is poor planning on my part. But remember, it opens up with this sleeper cell being activated,
That's right.
and
And
but
that's
he's
the
a mole. He
suitcase
but
nukes.
is the suitcase news, but he's actually on our side, but you don't really know if he's on our
That's
side.
right.
But he has to go. He wants to go get it just because he's been activated and
That
he
was
needs.
very intriguing.
Yes,
For a cold open that has nothing to do with your main character, you're just introducing some new person. That was a good one. And I completely forgot about it.
and then you immediately have
Doesn't he
Gary
contact
Lawler
Gary?
get yeah like there's some sort of
A back
contact, and then
channel.
Gary gets taken right
Right.
immediately.
Right.
So like you're like, what the hell happened to Gary? Is Gary bad? Like because we haven't really like we're just getting to know who Gary is right for through the
That's
first
right.
two books, and in the first book, Gary was kind of an asshole to Scott, right?
He
Because
was.
Scott was like,
He was.
doing his own thing, and then you come to realize like the fatherly figure,
Exactly.
or I guess you can kind of see like how Brad's process of writing Gary as a character, and like how he sets him up, and then like you as you go through the book, you kind of see like where he wants to go with this guy. So
Dude, you're so right bringing that up. And how Gary's backstory with Helmut Draeger drives the plot because Draeger wants revenge for being left by Gary Lawler, to
right,
die in that explosion. And Gary thought he killed him. And, he's a ghost from his past. That's good stuff. It also, what you're saying, can you trust Gary? It's so early on in the series, we as the reader don't know who he is yet.
right,
Yet Scott thought he knew who he was, but kind of had a beef with him from losing his own father and Gary not fully being there, him pushing Gary out. I love those dynamics early on. Makes me think of Thomas Stansfield, how right away in the second book by Vince Flynn, Mitch has to surprise Stansfield, put
at his
literally a gun
house,
to him in his own house and like decide if he can trust him and Irene. So those good early days where you don't even know if you could trust Irene Kennedy, Thomas Stansfield, that's
right,
like here, we're kind of like, who is this Gary Lawler character? That's just like reading nostalgia right there, going back to those
hmm
moments and looking at it 20 books later and knowing how you would trust all of them with your life. Like I would trust
right,
Gary Lawler with my life.
right.
Yet back then we didn't. We didn't
We didn't
know.
know.
That's
No, we didn't know.
exciting.
And Brad didn't know. Or,
Brad didn't
it
know where
wasn't
he was
written
going to
yet.
go. Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah, and then
exciting.
I think blowback. Again, we're not gonna really talk about blowback, but like it's these first 4 to 5. I think takedown. We're starting to obviously when he goes from takedown to first commandment,
There's a
continuing
voice. He has a
continuing that
voice.
story. He's kind of figuring out what he wants to do. So these first 5 books are like all completely different, like
Yeah.
just doing something different in each different one. And then we kind of like hit a stride. It's like I want to do this, but then he jumps back to last. But every now and then, Scott does these like one-offs with the Last Patriot. Like having the whole I call it National Treasure Light
Yeah.
with adventure with. I guess it's
Thomas
coming.
Jefferson.
It's coming back to it's a better version of what he was trying to do in Blowback.
It
Like
is.
I would prefer
Exactly.
Last Patriot than Blowback.
So true.
But then we get the Apostle, which is a hardcore boots on the ground. Scott's like in Afghanistan almost the entire time, and then like the side story, we don't even like really like they never interact. Like that was the most interesting part of that book was like we're reading these like two stories that are happening,
Yeah.
across an ocean, and you're always thinking, oh, how are they gonna? At least I'm always trained to think, how are they gonna like come together?
Because
And they
Vince
don't,
Flynn would do that
right?
masterfully.
And they don't actually ever come together in the sense of like actually talking, but like their plots do like come together, I guess.
Yeah,
He does this too with the Chicago cops, right?
exactly,
In
exactly.
that's also in that's in the First Commandment, right? Yeah.
He does that a few times, Scott. He has a police procedural on the side.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's
Yeah.
some crooked cop or some cop who's kind of off the deep end, but we need them to be crazy to figure something out. And ultimately that will siphon or, filter down to Scott and his crew or one of the analysts who pushes him information that lets him do his job. Wouldn't you say there's a few times that police procedural is the side story, and
Oh
sometimes
yeah.
it's very
Yeah.
well, it's weaved in masterfully, and sometimes it's like, who was that who had the cousin who was a druggie who was married to somebody who knew somebody who worked for a Russian mob who then contacts somebody else and like shares something and has them go to a house and break in and they find a document. Like that occasionally happened a few times and got a little loose, a little wiggly, but when it's done well, it could work.
Yeah, and like, well, we have like the Ozbek. Remember him from
Yes, yes,
The Last
yes.
Patriot? Like, where's multiple scenes where he's like tracking, someone and that eventually is going to be related to Scott, right? They
Exactly.
ultimately meet up at that um in Annapolis at the
That's
one
right.
memorial, right?
Right. I forgot about that Annapolis scene. Is that
Yeah,
Last Patriot?
that is The Last Patriot. Yeah, yeah,
Okay. So Ozbek, I remember a few times because another category, which maybe we should transition to soon in our superlatives, one of them is going to be best supporting cast. Or like, who is one of these allies or side characters that's not with Scott for very long, but
right.
who played a role and was really well written. Ozbek, I again, like Meg Cassidy, kind of falls flat in that category. There's so many better people. Padre Peo, Herman the German, Bullet Bob. Those three names right there are
Mm,
legendary. I don't know how you pick a favorite of those three. You had somebody like an Ozbek, you're like, what did he do again? You know, or even there
no,
was
he.
somebody else undercover. It's like you can't compete with the Padre Peo, Bullet Bob, and Herman the Germans.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask you about this. Like, does someone like the Athena team, who are more, well, one, they had their own book written about them. Like, are they classified as supporting characters? Because they pop up in a couple different books
I think so.
outside of, the Athena project.
I think so. And they each play different roles. Like Riley Turner was very different than Gretchen
Right.
Casey, who's like the leader, the commander. Rhodes is kind of like the foot soldier of it all. I say supporting cast, yes, because there's been a few times the supporting cast was a team like that. You
Mhm.
know, Bullet Bob's PTSD
Right.
patients who
They
help
were
out
going to
in
be my other
Takedown.
one. Yeah.
It's
But
like a
they're
cast.
only in that book, right?
Or
But,
Gallagher,
well,
right,
besides Tracy, Tracy is one of the supporting cast.
who
So,
continues.
yeah.
Yeah. So she kind of is a separate character. But then you also have the last, excuse me, I almost said the last apostle again, the apostle with Gallagher, right? Doesn't he have a
Right.
team in Afghanistan who Scott
Hmm.
beds with?
Baba
So
G. Yeah.
Baba G, right? At Flower, the local guy, their informant. I feel like there's a couple of times those teams. So maybe it's like best team up with Scott and then best supporting character individual. Two
Mm.
separate awards at the Golden Globes.
Yeah, that's good.
We need a name for this, like the Oscars, the Golden Globes.
Yeah, because like Wood is Gary Lawler a supporting character? Is the troll a supporting character?
That's because now when I'm thinking like that B or C class.
B or
Gary
C class.
Lawler, Nicholas, and Reed
Carlton.
Carlton are the A team.
Mm.
I would call them the A level supporting characters or secondary characters. They're primary. I mean, primary, secondary ish. I think the names that we're throwing out now are more like the
So
BC level.
Scott is 1A, they're
1A.
1B.
They're
They're
1B.
1B.
All
And
the people we just
we're talking about
mentioned
the
are
twos.
twos. Yeah, 2A,
And
2B,
then you
2C.
have two, yeah, yeah.
And then you get a C level, which is like some dude who popped up once and doesn't come back 2 books later.
But that like Gallagher doesn't come back at all. Is he a C character?
That's a good question.
I think like a C character is like some like random person. I would classify him more as a B character. But anyways,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you
I
have
think,
like Rick Morel. He's another character I
but
thought of.
he was around for a bit though,
Hmm.
like in the early days. So I would
And then
definitely say B character.
what was the that guy's
Sean
name?
Chase, B character.
Right. What was Vinny? Del Vecchio he was one of
Oh,
those.
so I wanted to ask you this. In the 2 hours of preparation for this podcast, we didn't
Mhm.
mention once, and we are however long into this episode, and we didn't say once the name Skip motherfucking Treywick.
Oh no, so I wrote
Dude,
down Caroline Leonard and all the other Secret Service people that we were first introduced to
yeah,
in Lions, right?
right.
And that's where we first get a sense for like
Kate Palmer,
these B characters. Yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, a couple of them come back and are attacked
right.
in the First Commandment.
Don't you
And
want to
then
know what happened to Gordo Aviliano?
that's what his
That's who
name,
you're thinking of?
not Del
Yeah.
Vecchio. I knew it was Italian. It
You
was
knew it was
Italian.
a lot of vowels. You knew there were a lot of
Yeah,
vowels.
Gordo Vigla. I see. I thought he was going to become, and I think Brad was like
Yeah,
kind of teasing that he was going to be part of this team.
I think
And
so.
then
I think he dropped the ball at one point. I think there was some op where you got the hint that he wasn't cut out for it or something like that. And then immediately he was kind of dropped. And for a while, let's be honest, didn't you think Gary Lawler evaporated into thin air for a little while? Kind of in
oh
that
no,
late middle stage.
there's a lot of books where Gary's not involved at all.
And that's when Reed Carlton is coming in, stepping
Right.
into the role.
Yeah.
So it's interesting how
Well, I think once the OIIA
exactly.
gets disbanded,
Yep.
and I think like the last book we've heard from Gary was The Apostle, right? Because that was his first mission where he like kind of just goes on his own as a favor for the president.
Yeah, yeah.
And then right after that, that's when he gets hired to be a private
Yeah.
contractor and folded into this place. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But back in the day of Lions, didn't you love Skip Treywick? Like, remember
yeah,
the
no,
Scottish
no,
accent when
because
he
he
popped
popped
out of
up.
the bathroom? He was taking a shit or something, and Scott's like, "Yeah, where's Skip?" And then you just hear a Scottish accent or something, or "We need a doctor," and he comes out
Right.
just shooting shit.
Because he also pops up in Path too. And I think he also pops up in State of the Union. So he's
Couple
like
times,
there in the first three books,
he's great.
thinking that he's going to be, a regular player, but he's not. So
Early on, though, wouldn't you say he's a B1? He's B
yeah,
tier.
yeah.
Then he's
So if you
gone.
had out of all of these, who would you pick as your best supporting character?
We're starting with that one. Okay, first superlative. Drum roll, please. Goes to supporting character. Never mind. This is harder than I thought.
Mine's got to be Bullet Bob.
I was gonna say it.
I love that book.
Yeah.
I love that storyline.
If he came
His-
back one more time, though,
His death is it hits hard.
yeah.
For me, he's the best.
I wanted to say him, and then in my mind, I'm like, he doesn't get a second book, but that's because his story arc is complete.
Right.
So as he's written, he has the arc. It's perfect. I think I'm going to go with Bullet Bob. I just in the moment. So maybe this is like my honorable mention. In the moment, because he just came back, Padre Peo.
Yeah.
I just loved the introduction to him, and then I loved his return in Blacklist. So I think between those two, you can't go wrong. Early on, I would have said Herman the German. I would have said Skip, but
I'll have to give it to Gretchen Casey.
yeah,
Honorable mention to her.
Then you got the Athena.
If I had to
ladies.
pick all of them, I would pick her.
I think of the Athena ladies, definitely her. I wasn't sold on Riley Turner
No, she was kind of annoying.
as a
She
love interest. Yeah,
and she didn't like the rest of the. It seemed like there was some
No.
beef between the rest of the team.
she wasn't a
and
full
her.
operator either. She was like, wasn't she like the medic?
I mean, I guess she was an operator, but also a doctor.
Yeah,
But yeah, but I guess she felt like she was
she didn't vibe.
extra because she got to go on these missions with the Carlton group.
Yeah. So I definitely would say Gretchen Casey there. If we're counting her as this B1 kind of tier supporting cast, and absolutely, she's up there too. So I think I got to say Bullet Bob, Gretchen Casey, Padre Peo. Herman the German, I wanted to say as well, like I mentioned him before, But again, outside of what is that, State of the Union?
He's only in one book.
There's not much more to him. So when he comes on strong. And the
He doesn't he
Berlin
come back?
scenes.
No, wait, doesn't he come back in the second book?
Does he? Maybe he does just have a conversation with somebody.
Maybe we haven't gotten to it yet.
Well, he comes back that much later, you think?
I don't know.
I don't know. That's a big opportunity, though.
This is the problem. When we were doing this with Mitch, we were only literally reading the 10 books.
It was the only series.
It was the only
doing.
series we were doing. And then now that we've thrown in all of those books, all of these,
Jack
all
Carr,
of our other
Chris
books
Hardy,
we're reading,
Tom
everything is
Bentley.
kind of like just bleeding together. Sorry, guys.
And I'm in the middle of Sons of Valor right now, as I know you are too. So got that on my mind.
I think we picked the right person, though. So.
I think you're right.
Now, you want to transition to Harvath ladies? Little more fun topic.
Okay. I see you. Well endowed.
Well endowed. So the ones I picked out were Claudia, Meg, Gretchen, Riley, Tracy, and Alexandra. Those were the main love interests. There's times where he interacts with other girls, but he's already with, like, there's the one book, The Last Patriot. There is a girl, but he's seeing Tracy at the time, so like
mm-hmm.
I don't count her.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a series of like State of the Union. Well, I guess Alexander's with him when he's still with Meg, and then like there's another chick in Blowback, but he's still kind of with Meg. So like I'm not really counting those things. But out of everyone, those 5 stuck out to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. And that Alexandra one, I think, is the most obscure there, like C or D level. She's like a Russian asset who pops up in the one with the suitcase nukes and Helmut.
State of the Union.
Yeah. State of the Union. And what's kind of neat is she's out there in the universe. I don't think she died in that one of those explosions or shootouts. So she's a Russian intelligence officer, highly skilled, but who hated Helmut Draeger just as much as Scott and Gary, who wanted to get him. So she works with Scott. I think that could be a real deep cut back at some point in the future.
Yeah.
But of this list, obviously, most recently where we're at in the series, Gretchen Casey stands out for sure. And Tracy Hastings was a lot of fun when she was around. I mean, maybe you can question what happened to her, and maybe she's the one with the most like sympathy that Scott could have been with, and he fell for so damn hard. So I think
I liked her a lot in
Takedown.
Takedown. Yeah. But after that, she kind of like, because of what happens, she just falls off a cliff.
Yeah, she does. And that was hard though. Like I enjoyed the writing of Scott and Tracy going through that. I think that process was handled very maturely. It just sucked as a reader, you know?
Yeah, it's very like it's depressing, you know, but it's more, it made it real. Like it made it like, as opposed to this Meg, right? Where they're, or, you know, you can even think of like other characters we've read where these operators just can't have a life. They can't have a wife. So they drift apart, right?
Yeah. So I think Tracy, perhaps as a love interest for Scott, was probably the most interesting, most intriguing. And even her background as an EOD tech, like, that was kind of a unique, kind of different way. And even being a survivor, you know, and a PTSD patient, and how she's brought in with that baggage, really cool way for them to interact and work through things, and it made the relationship real, you know, like a disabled veteran and having to go through that. But I gotta say, the classic answer here is Claudia Mueller. You go back to Lions of Lucerne. They were a great team up. You loved it off the bat. It was kind of a shame when Meg came into the picture. I think that's another reason Meg Cassidy is not a fan favorite, because she kind of edged out Claudia Mueller for no reason. And it was also kind of cool that Claudia almost was a Scot in that they couldn't be together because they were both so dedicated to their countries. And to
that's why Solby reminds me a lot of Claudia, right?
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I believe it. I believe it for sure.
But I liked how Scott had closure with Claudia. With like, remember they meet up again, and he brings in her husband, and as an operator. So, like Scott they could have been together if Scott had just been an operator in Switzerland, right? and said he's American.
They each, I think, to be together, they would have each had to make sacrifices to things
Hmm.
that matter dearly to them, and they both
At that
realized it
stage.
wasn't fair
Yeah.
to ask the other to do that because it's something they wouldn't have done themselves. So yeah, Claudia and Tracy are at the top. I give the edge to Claudia just
I
because
would
of
give it to Claudia too. Right now,
classic.
now we have to revisit this list because she's not. I Lara is like,
Exactly.
yeah, like one of
Lara's the
my
big one.
favorite. Yeah.
Lara's a
So
big one. He almost falls for Lara like he did Tracy. Like I was surprised when we read the Tracy Hastings books how much he was talking about
hmm.
her being the love interest of his life and the person he thinks he found the person.
Right.
And I was like, wow, that's shocking knowing what happens later. How does he move on from her? And they did. At least the page time was given to have them separate and go through what they had to go through to separate.
Yeah, for sure.
It sucked, but
What about best villain?
we had some good ones. We
Yeah.
really did, but we also had a lot of shitty ones. Like I don't know. I'm just kind of like,
So we had Helmet
our
Traeger in
villains
State of the
mid.
Union. Yeah. So like, there's not a lot of villains. And again, we're biased here, being the original Mid Trap boys.
There's
Like,
no Hank
there's
Clark. There's
yeah,
no Hank Clark.
exactly. Or there's no Rafik Aziz.
There's no Rafiq Aziz, or even who's the chief of staff that we hated?
Oh, Garrett Garrett Stevens? Yeah,
Stu Garrett.
Stu
Stu
Garrett. I
Garrett.
knew it. I'm mixing people up. See, I even mix up mid trap stuff. So
I mean, it's unfortunate that we have a Stu Garrett, a Hank Clark, and a Rafiq Aziz because that is hard to top. And it's just unfortunate. I don't think the Scot Harvath series so far has sold me on that. The
yeah,
amalgam,
and a lot of times there's not a lot of villains that cross over, right, from book
yeah,
to book.
yeah,
There's a lot of like the only ones so far have been standing, but we didn't even see him in the first book. He was kind of like just the shadowy figure controlling Ashford, right? I think like that Ashford standing thing was like they're pretty good. Like I
yeah.
enjoyed that. I think they would have to be at the top of my list. But like a single book villain, you know, I liked Middleton from this last one we read.
That
I
was
thought
good.
he was an interesting character. Aziz Aleem from Foreign Influence, because he's the one like actually doing the terror plots. Takedown has Abdul Ali like in like their whole situation. So, but they're kind of like just like fill in, you know,
Yeah,
terrorist villains. You know,
yeah. I think if you're going single book, we talked about it. I got to go Helmut Draeger just
yeah,
because his backstory with Gary.
very different, interesting. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, we're dealing with the backstory with Gary while we're dealing with Scott and knowing his father and their relationship. And I thought that was good. And I think I'm also going to say if you're going for the bigger villain, not just a single book villain, the Ashford James Standing amalgam kind of conspiracy, even Bianchi, the weapons dealer.
all right, because that's also involved with
It's a
the Athena
network.
project. Like that, those three
Exactly.
books are all involved. Yeah, yeah,
So I don't think I can give it to an individual, but I would say that those three books creating a network of villains, which also leads to Nicholas having to be brought in because he's the data broker. So he has connections to each of them and he can uncover the connections between them. I think that's a great vehicle to bring in the troll. Yeah, the amalgam was a pretty cool creation as a villainous entity.
yeah, yeah, for sure. I have to give it to that.
Yeah.
There's also what did you think of like Adara, the Ari Shone, or Adara Nidal and her son?
When it all came together, cool, like going back to it, and the silver-eyed assassin in Path of the Assassin was kind of this cool, a little cheap device though at the same time. It ended up being cool. I still can't keep up with it. You'd have to do a lot of mental gymnastics to go back and remember who Ari Shone was and who married who and who turned on who. And I forgot Abu Nidal was really who was married to Adara Nidal, who was somebody else. It was cool in the moment, but does it withstand the test of time? It kind of fades. I know I had that all wrong right there. I can't keep
Yeah,
up with it.
Ava Nidal is her father. Adara Nidal is the daughter, and they had a son and a daughter, and they thought like the son was in charge, which is actually the daughter was in charge.
Oh, that's right.
And then she fell in love with this guy in England who happens to be Ari Shone's son, and then they had a
Okay.
son together, and he becomes the villain of.
That's a cool network then. I remember when that happened and I got it. Like it clicked when I read it. It
Mhm.
worked. It's
Yeah.
not clicking now for me, but that's on me.
All right, so we'll give it to the Amalgam. Best villain, the Amalgam. But yeah, no, it's kind of like I don't. It's hard to say because I enjoyed like a lot of these books, but the villains just don't stand out to me. Maybe
Yeah.
that's by design. He wants to have a solid story, and but yeah, it's interesting. Now that
Yeah.
I like think about him as a whole.
Yeah. So if villains are not the strong suit, I think what is the strong suit for Mr. Thor is traveling heavy.
Yeah,
Chris, what stands out to you as like, and I'm going to just say besides Switzerland and Lions of Lucerne,
I know
what's
that was gonna be my first go to.
I think that's the clear winner.
Hmm.
Besides that, what other traveling heavy segments stand out to you? Whether it's a whole book, like the whole compilation of where they go, or just an individual scene that you were transported there.
Yeah, I think like when we go like foreign influence to me because we go a lot of different places, and we're Scott doesn't necessarily go a lot of different places because we jump from like there's the attack in Rome, and then we go to Chicago, and then but then we go and we meet up in this Basque country with Padre Pio and like being taken there, like that was kind of cool. The Apostle, even though it's very light on traveling
Sure,
heavy, we don't go a lot of places, but
sure.
I felt like the descriptions of Afghanistan and like that kind of stuff was amazing in terms of setting. The Last Patriot were everywhere in the United, like the northwest region, just going
Yeah,
around, looking at different monuments and stuff, all the way down to anywhere that Thomas Jefferson touched. Like that was kind of like that was one of the better parts of that book
yeah,
was like learning the history. I mean, that's why I like those kind of like Indiana Jones style
yeah.
things. 'Cause I learned stuff, and it makes me want to like sit down and Google and read. Oh, is this real? Like that kind of stuff. So,
Those adventures are fun when you're in them, but the second you start thinking about them and like
yeah.
your buy-in, it just kind of crumbles a little bit, unfortunately. But yeah, I
Well,
will
then
agree.
the whole like the Muhammad, like the finding that was just like kind
The
of
Muhammad's last message or
yeah,
something.
yeah,
Yeah, those, and I almost miss it. It's funny I say this because I almost miss that Brad Thor early on. You could tell he just delighted in those historical fiction kind of nuggets that he could throw in. And I feel like lately we haven't gotten that. But the good news is, while that's missing, and that's seriously like, man, that was something cool that he tried and experimented with, and it was fun. Didn't make for some really good books, but I feel like he replaced that with the geopolitical angle,
yeah, for
whether
sure.
it's Near Dark or Black Ice, honestly, into Rising Tiger, right? Like that to me is what that grew into. The original, I'm going to play in the history sandbox and kind of get some things wrong, but at least we had fun doing it, became, I'm actually going to put my finger on the geopolitics of it all and get it right
Hmm.
in the current era instead of trying to go back and mess with and make up fake history.
Right.
So, yeah, that was a fun transition. But traveling heavy, I would agree with everything you said, but I want to add two: New York takedown.
Oh
Like,
yeah, I was gonna say that too.
whether we're under whatever it was the Holland
Yeah,
Tunnel
the
or we're
tunnels, the
going
bridges.
Central
Yeah.
Park, the bridges, when Bookbag, the daughter, the president's daughter, is
Oh
hit on the
right,
bridge
right,
and
right.
taken. No, not Bookbag. Bookbag was, I did this before. That was the president's daughter in West Wing. What's her Secret Service name here? Blondie, Goldilocks. Goldilocks.
Goldilocks,
When
Goldilocks.
Goldilocks is
I was
taken.
like, I was just nodding, like, what is book bag? You're gonna tell me, like,
Dude, I did the same thing when we did Takedown. I used the code word for
the West
West
Wing. You're
the
watching too
West
much
Wing
West Wing.
president, the president's daughter there. Yeah, because she gets taken in Georgetown. That's actually a really cool episode. And then the other one I'll shout out, the Athena Project, the
Oh,
scene in Rome,
we're everywhere there
not
too.
Rome, in Venice, the scene
Venice.
in Venice. I remember feeling like this is Casino Royale, like that scene, and they're jumping out the window, getting picked up by the boats. With the Athena ladies are driving the op because they needed to use sex to distract this guy and drug him. That was a really freaking banging scene. So you got it with the Apostle in Afghanistan, New York, the Venice Op in Athena Project. Brad Thor, you are the master of traveling heavy.
We're realizing that he can do both globe trotting, like lions. I mean, the one of the best parts about Blowback is just him describing. Probably the only good part about Blowback is him describing all the different places that he goes, like to find this Hannibal, like, to track Hannibal, right?
Yep.
Or he can be more introspective and super hardcore in a setting and be like isolated in one place, like New York, like Afghanistan,
Yep. Yep.
and really give it like Ukraine. And we're not talking about it, but like Ukraine in the
Deadfall.
last book and
Yeah.
Deadfall. Yeah. So
Or Rising Tiger. We went all
in
over
India.
India.
Yeah.
You can almost
almost.
smell. You could like touch and feel and smell the streets of India. Yeah.
Yeah.
In that book. I would say there's some growth there as well because a couple of the early books that traveled a little too heavy, they could get tiresome when you were globetrotting to 6 different continents just because it's cool to do so. I think he's tightened that up a little bit.
I'd have to give it to Lions though.
Yeah, Lions takes the cake there for sure. Switzerland, the chalets, the mountains, the cogwheel railroads, everything. What do you say, Chris? You want to talk covers, and then we can end with our actual list 1 through 12. What we think of the first.
I think that's all we have left to do.
Yeah. And I say 12 books because Athena Project. What is there? 11 Scot Harvath books, and then Athena we're including on this list.
Yes, correct.
Covers. We cannot pick The Last Patriot. People have heard our thoughts on L'Ultimo Patriota. We're moving on, Chris. Give me a different cover and or a set of covers that you've just really enjoyed.
All right. Let me we actually have I'll give a little plug here. We can go to thrillerpod.com, go to Brad Thor, and you can find all of the covers that Mike so graciously puts together in these little thumbnails. Again, Lion stands out to me. With the lion, like when you look at it, it's like, what is this? And then when you find out what that lion is, and it's got the American flag in it, that definitely sticks out to me. Blowback. Should we talk about? I actually really liked the covers for Blowback.
Yeah, I agree.
Because they actually, we're doing judge a book by the cover, judge a cover by the book. They had something to do with it. I appreciate that kind of stuff. So, what else we got here? We got some generic things. Takedown. I love if you're on our website, B Takedown. I don't know if it's the original paperback cover.
Cover B, yeah.
It's got, I like the black and the red, and you got the New York skyline, the Statue of Liberty, the New York skyline. I don't know, love that cover. Hated how they got rid of, I guess, no, they have Manhattan in C, but it's like very hard to like tell.
You think that's a communist book with that red star?
Not a big fan of this new line.
No.
We're gonna get into like some real bad ones later on, but
yeah, and it's kind of a shame because I'm looking through these. The original paperbacks, I guess those were like the first mass market paperbacks.
Mm-hmm.
They almost all bang. Like
cover B.
Yeah, it's B for Takedown, but I mixed it in because I put it as E for the first Lion's Path and State of the Union.
Yes.
It was E on those ones, but then it was cover B for a while. You're right. So I mixed that up, but you can clearly see, right? Like it has a style. It's a two-tone, almost a solid background, and then solid text in a very contrasting color, and some shadow on the text, camouflaged into the text of something central to the book. And that's the key. The Statue of Liberty for Takedown.
Yeah, Statue of Liberty. There's a lion in Lions. There's like a mosque that plays a big role in Path of the Assassin.
Yes.
It
makes sense. Blowback, the biohazard sign.
Yeah, that line of covers is banging.
Yeah, the hammer and sickle for State of the Union. Those original mass market paperbacks were just everything, literally everything you could want. And then unfortunately, cover C came along, these new release
Mm.
paperbacks, and they're trash, dude. They're trash. A majority of them just suck. They came up with these dumb symbols that don't have anything to do with the story. Why make the symbol the through line? Make something from the story the through line. Forget about it. Now,
Yeah.
you can't see it yet. I'm going to update thrillerpod.com, but like Chris said, you can see all these covers, everyone pretty much ever produced, including international covers of all Brad Thor's works right here on our page. But I need to update this one because I'm pretty sure it's my winner of best cover in this series, including current books, even ones we haven't read yet.
Really?
Full Black. Dude, I love the silhouette of that kitted out operator on Full Black with the flames, or it's not even flames, it's like a sky. I just think the design on Full Black is really cool.
Oh, Full Black's a good cover.
And the fact that it's black and the word at the bottom, black, is all in black, but the black is coming through on the other words, almost kind of making them hard to decipher, which is the point of that book, you know?
Yeah.
Sean Chase is undercover. That's the one with the Uppsala op, right?
Yeah, and they go to London where the bombing is, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I really think you get that one gets it right. And this is another one that I think sneaks in. I think this is a sneaky cover for me that pushes itself into the conversation. Look at the Athena Project. I can't get over cover B.
I really like cover B. I think we talked about that.
We did.
Because it's different because it's
different.
it's obviously a different series, a side series, but I like it a lot.
The
And
composition
is that in Venice?
I don't know. I got to be honest. I'm trying to think of how it related to the story. I know when we read the book, we made that connection.
I think it's the doors, like like around there. This is
St.
somewhere
Mark's.
in Venice.
I think it very well could be those arches. That very well could be like a colonnade around St.
Mhm.
Mark's Square somewhere. I think it very well could be. Something about the composition, how it's off-centered a little bit, right? It's
Right.
not picture perfect. It's using like that rule of thirds. It's got the Athena Project left margin justified towards the bottom. Something about space and the visual layout of that
Oh
cover.
yeah, I like the left justified. That's interesting. Yeah,
Instead of
most
centering
of
it.
these are what is that called? Center justified.
Yeah, exactly. There's something about the composition of that book looks really good, but
I'm
a
staring
couple.
at Rising Tiger, and I really like that cover. But we're not talking about Rising Tiger yet.
We're not talking Rising Tiger or Deadfall because both of those covers could be up there as well. You are right about that, especially in Rising Tiger, the Jaipur gates, how those
Mhm.
are actual carved reliefs. And Deadfall, we talked about the statue in Ukraine, but I would say Lions of Lucerne. You're right. That would probably hit my 3 spot if I'm going Full Black, Full Black A, Athena Project B, Lions of Lucerne. Give me A or B. They're both just really great,
Right.
capturing the essence of that book. And
For
then
me,
everything in the mass market paperback line.
yeah, you could say that. I really like Takedown cover B. I like Lions A, B, or E.
Yeah.
The mass market paperback or the originals. And I don't know, I kind of like these State of the Union ones too,
Yeah.
with the hammers and sickles. I like when they throw in the because that obviously that's like pertinent for that. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I for me it's Blowback. That's my winner.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. That's a great one. One other honorable mention. We said this before. These Indian covers, like I said,
They're
the
crazy.
Goa region, the Marathi Goa region of India, they're banging out some awesome covers because there's a couple of just look for the ones with some sort of Hindi script or text, and they hit, man. They're really good designs, almost movie poster-esque covers.
This is a cool page, guys. You should go check it out, even if you just want to look at a big snapshot of all the Brad Thor covers. And
Yeah.
we're going to be putting up our 2 latest books that we covered.
And while you're there, go ahead and click the menu option at the top and go to the Thriller Pod scorecard tab because, Chris, I think it's time to rank these books.
Yes.
And we're going to have a discussion of how much weight our scorecard score gets versus how the book's aged in our mind to this point here and now. So if you want to see all of our scorecards, every marking that we gave these books along the way, thrillerpod.com, click the scorecard tab, and it opens a Google sheet. I will admit might not be the easiest thing to read and find your way through at first, but it does lay out every score that we've given these books. So, Chris, how do you want to do this and rank these books 1 through 12?
Well, I think we should first both give our ranking based on our scorecard. But I've always, in every time we've done this, in any of the series, I've always reserved the right to, my top list at a given point is in the moment, and it's fluid. It can change, and I'm not beholden to any previous scores that I might have given a book, when we were on it. So for me, we were going purely off of my scorecard. It would be Takedown, State of the Union. Tied is The Apostle and Blacklist. We have First Commandment, Foreign Influence. Tied then is Full Black and Last Patriot. Then we have Athena Project and Blowback. So you'll notice that we haven't mentioned Lions and Path because this was before we had our 50-point scorecard.
Yeah.
And we tried to just multiply in order to put it on a 50-point scale, but it would essentially put Lions in the middle to the low end of the pack for us, and that's not right. So I have brought it up maybe should we do this on the pod? But I think honestly we could get a whole other pod. We could sit down and sort of revisit those first two books and do our proper scorecard.
Yeah.
Sit down 30 minutes each and do that pod. So
Yeah.
we'll do that in the future.
I think end of Scot Harvath. I
Sure.
think when we come to a close of covering all the books, we reread Lions. That has to be our closing.
Yeah, that's a nice way to do that. Yeah.
Lions is a book you can revisit anytime, as many times as possible, and it will always hit.
Yep, for sure. Which book we revisited a book? Term Limits. We redid Term Limits.
Yes, we went back to do Term Limits again. That's right. Which I think I would say the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It's the bookend. You got to start with it. You got to end with it.
Yeah.
All right. So that's your list. And I'm not going to go through my total one, but very similar with you. Score wise, Takedown took the cake. You had State of the Union second, but I had The Apostle, which I know you like that too, in third. I pretty much had a tie between Full Black, Blacklist, our recent books, just really like them. I had First Commandment up there as well. Interesting. We talked about how that book has done so much. It was heavy lifting. Then I had State of the Union, followed by Foreign Influence, Athena Project. Yeah, like that one, but it's not going to crack your top five. It's good. It's not going to crack your top five. I had Last Patriot and Blowback down at the bottom. Path of the Assassin probably is going to be somewhere bottom dwelling down there too. We don't have a score for it. So
how do you want to do this? You want to do bottom up?
Yeah, I think we get out of the way just Blowbacks at the very bottom. Absolutely.
Yes.
I'm going to say Path of the Assassins down there too, with probably Last Patriot.
It's definitely Blowback, Last Patriot, Blowback.
Path?
It's definitely Blowback, Path, and then I would put Last Patriot. Yeah. That's the bottom tier.
Yeah, I think you're right. Kind of a bummer for Last Patriot, but yeah. The other ones are just too good.
And then I think rising right above that, I would probably put Athena Project. Or do you think it's do you think it's a little bit better than a Foreign Influence?
Reed Carlton, Site 451, Padre Peo.
No.
The London Bike Bombs, Nikki Rodriguez being trapped, Ashford,
That's
Chase.
better than Athena Project.
The Amalgam and the Troll are coming out. Yeah, I think we definitely have to put Foreign Influence better than the Athena Project for sure. And probably middle of the pack. Foreign Influence is not cracking top 5, but it doesn't deserve any lower than that. Yeah.
Okay.
Where do you think I kind of group these books? First Commandment, State of the Union as these really good books, very important books. Are they doing a whole lot for the series? Yes. Are they great books on their own, kind of just standing alone? Maybe not. What do you think about? Am I wrong in saying probably State of the Union and First Commandment is the next like tier up?
So would you say, I guess we have to answer First Commandment, State of the Union, are they better than Full Black? Are they worse than Full Black and
Oh,
Blacklist?
Blacklist. Oh, I forgot about those two. I think those two go together in my mind. Full Black and Blacklist. They're both like equally good and pretty darn good,
And pretty darn good.
but not going to crack your 3 spot or
No,
maybe flirting 5 spot.
I see. I really like State of the Union though.
Yeah, I agree, and it did a lot.
But I
Tough
think
call.
I think here is where we put First Commandment for sure.
Yeah, First Commandment did a lot, but when you read it, it's just a little clogged up. It's a little busy, a little heavy. So First Commandment sits right above Foreign Influence. Now, do we slot in the Blacklist, Full Black 1-2 punch, or is it State of the Union for a little nostalgia? Little Herman the German, old Berlin scenes, Madam of the Night. We didn't even talk. Dude,
Yeah.
who the fuck is Alice?
It
Was that State of the
Alice.
Union?
Yeah, that was State of the Union.
That was a fun ride. And coming
I
off of
think
Path of the Assassin, we needed State of the Union to be good. And
I think State of the Union is above Full Black and Blacklist.
I think
I
you
don't
might
know.
be right.
I don't know. That's a tough call.
I think you might be right.
Blacklist
Helmut
is really
Draeger,
good.
Gary
Though.
Lawler, let me see. What was Full Black? Full Black was Sean Chase,
James
Luke Ralston.
Standing.
That got really weird. The Ralston.
It's like the
Solomon.
conclusion to the amalgam.
Yeah. No, I think State of the Union's better than it.
Yeah.
I think I'm going
I'm going Full Black there.
Full Black next because Blacklist is better than it.
Yes.
But
yes.
State of the Union's better than that.
Yeah.
So working our way up from Athena Project, Foreign Influence, First Commandment. Next is Full Black because it wasn't the best of these 3. Blacklist because it was slightly better than Full Black. And then State of the Union because it was a fun ride of early Brad days. And it was just a good novel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which leaves the heavy hitters.
Yes. So what do we have left? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9. And there
the Athena
are
Project. Use Foreign
1, 2,
Influence.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. There's 11 books.
Blacklist, Full
So we have
Black.
2 left.
We basically just have Lions, The Apostle, and Takedown. And we both, I mean, can we just say it? Lions is getting the first spot.
Yeah.
It's classic.
Lions is my number 1 book.
Do you remember that skiing scene when he's trying to save the president's daughter in that igloo, that makeshift igloo, and he's barely maneuvering around. His back's broken, her back's broken. He can't move her neck.
Oh,
has to isolate the spine.
when he like uses like the thing to like the
A-frame of the backpack.
No,
as a
doesn't
stretcher.
he? Yeah, oh, yeah, but he like deploys like this thing to protect them. Like it blows up like in order to like save them from the avalanche. Remember that?
Yeah, after he hides behind, he like gets them behind the rocks.
Right.
Then he does that, and then he pokes the ski pole through to make an air hole.
Right.
Dude, he's like MacGyvering that thing.
I remember he tracks. It's like he finds like the Nestle chocolate in when he goes to that Mormon house where the he's like he's like MacGyver, Indy.
It's everything.
Mission Impossible. That book is amazing, and it just you would think it wouldn't work, but it does.
Yeah,
you know.
Then they're climbing that mountain. Remember they scale the mountain?
Oh, right.
And Claudia Mueller's grandfather would talk to her about like World War II history and the Swiss like munitions depot, and she's like, they weren't building these railways for people to go up and look at the vistas and the viewpoints. Why would they need railways built to carry, heavy munitions? It was because they were bunkers. They were building bunkers and the railways carried it. Yeah. So we get a little bit of that fun Brad Thor history detective guy. At the same time, we're getting a believable story of Scott and how he can operate with his training and his SEAL background and his Secret Service detail. And then we're getting Kate Palmer, Carolyn Leonard, all of his crew. That book hits on many levels, and that book withstands the test of time.
Yeah, for sure.
Dude, we haven't even said Lucerne, like the city of Lucerne, traveling heavy. That could have been up there. When they're going across the bridge, the Kappelbrücke, the wooden bridge,
Yeah, and
and there's a
there's a
shootout.
giant shootout. Scott falls in the water.
Yeah, dude. Claudia saves him, picks him
Hmm.
out of the water, and warms him up. Fucking A. That's book number
That's
one, baby.
that's that's definitely book number one. All right, so now we have to decide between two and three, and I think we have Takedown and the Apostle. For me, both very near and dear to my heart,
Yeah.
but I think Takedown just edges out the Apostle a little bit. What about you?
Really? Okay.
You're the opposite. I knew you were going to be the opposite.
You were singing the praises of the apostle earlier and on another pod, but I hear you. You were also very high on Takedown when we read it. Unfortunately, it comes down to, I think, one small thing. Takedown got interrupted by a little bit of silliness in there with like some motorcycle gang at one point, and they rob a storefront, and then there was a horse going down Central Park, and somebody takes a horse like down the avenue.
Oh no, is this they steal a horse from a cop like a mounted patrol.
Yeah. And that was cool and all, but there were a few things in there that just get a little out of hand. There was some strange motorcycle something. It was like a motorcycle brigade or something. A bunch of brigands. I think that minor gripe I had with that book has to knock it below the Apostle. That's a tough call, though. That's
That
tough.
is a tough stuff. Ooh.
Which of these top five remain top five when we finish the series? Definitely Lions.
Hmm.
Probably Apostle and Takedown, depending if you put it first or second. State of the Union, I think, might have a tough time holding on to its 5 spot, but it could. And I think Blacklist just gets bumped down a little bit in the end, probably to like an 8 or a 9.
And I feel like, do I want to switch Blacklist with State of the Union?
Herman the German, dude.
I know, I know. I'm comfortable with like our bottom, like Blowback, Path, Patriot.
That was easier. The ones that missed, yeah, it was easier to
Then
do.
like when you put in Athena Project, Foreign Interludes, First Commandment, Full Black, yeah, we have to put them in some order, but they're all kind of like solid, just but grouped together. Not cream of the crop, but not the bottom.
Yeah.
Blacklist, yeah. All right. I stand by this. So we literally have the same exact list, just swap two and three.
Yeah.
I have Takedown. You have the Apostle at two.
There it is.
There it
Halfway
is.
through. Halfway gone.
Boom, baby. All right. So next time on the pod, we're gonna be covering tier one, baby.
Let's do
Get a
it.
little Sons of
Yes,
Valor.
sir. I got to post our reading list. I've had it ready for a little while now, just haven't gotten over that hump to posting it. But we are going to post our reading list for the first half of 2024 and get ready. Andrews and Wilson, Sons of Valor. A little bit of Don Bentley sprinkled in there to get ready for rap and the next rap verse book. We'll come back to Brad Thor a little later on, and we'll squeeze in some gems like I.S. Berry and the Peacock and the Sparrow. Hopefully a little T.J. Newman with Falling and Drowning as well. So busy times ahead.
Busy times. It was fun to talk about this, reflect on our
It
first
was.
part on Scott Harvath. Thanks for doing this with me, Mike.
Hey, no, thank you, Chris. You came up with a great format for this. I loved your idea to bring back the superlatives from like we did on our Mitrap Pod reflective episodes, and really had a good time. I was glad we got to go down this rabbit hole.
Yeah. Speaking of thanking, I need to thank our patrons, our special operator Sherry F, our special agents Daryl, Kevin, George, Ben, Matt, Dawn, Peggy, Ray, Bridget, and Mark. Please subscribe, rate, and review to all 3 seasons of No Limits using Apple Podcast or Spotify. Give us those 5 stars. You can find us online at thrillerpod.com or using Twitter or Instagram at Thriller Podcast. And as always, just let Thor be Thor.